COE61. This bunch of bisque is a delivery that we received back in the early days of 2020, and we did some tests on it, and we discovered that the expansion and contraction rate, which we call the coefficient of expansion, COE, was very low. Normally we're looking for a COE in the high 70s, and this batch of bisque was way down in the low 60s. And that means that when we put our normal clear glaze, like the 004 for example, onto these pieces, you get this. You get crazing in the surface of the glaze. Now you won't be able to see it on that, I shouldn't think, so I've rubbed ink into the surface of this one just so you can see the spider web of little tiny cracks, and that's a fault, and that's not acceptable, and that would render the piece not fit for food use, purely decorative. And actually this type of finish is actually quite attractive. This was using a different clear glaze, a Mako brushing clear glaze, and as you can see it's quite an effective, nice finish, but it renders the piece purely decorative. It's a non-food use item. So we have done various things to try and work out if there is a possible use for all of this batch of bisque. We've done tests with different temperatures, different products, different glazes, and essentially there is a limitation to what we've found that we can actually do. The solution, and there is one, is very specific, and it would involve you buying a powdered glaze that you mix up with water into a dipping consistency and dip the pieces, and as they come out of the firing they are stable. You have a glazed surface that is as you would expect with normal bisque, but you have to buy this powdered glaze in order to get that. And this looks grubby because I've rubbed ink over it to see if there's any little tiny cracks, which there are not. Now you might think, well then that's the solution, why don't you just sell us some of this magical new glaze and then we could use all of this? Well, if only it were that simple. That works on the bisque, but if you put in between the bisque and the glaze a colour product, then it's not stable. If you have, this is a sample here of stroke and coat put underneath the glaze, and the coefficient of expansion of the stroke and coat is a close match with the normal bisque that we're buying and selling you, and a close match with the 004 glaze, and that's a nice happy marriage between the clay, the colour and the glaze. When we put it onto this bisque with this different new glaze on it, the stress between those two different expansion and contraction rates means that the glaze will stress and crack, and I've again highlighted it on this piece with the ink so you can see the cracks that have shown up on the colour, yet not on the areas where the glaze is in contact with the bisque underneath. So using colour, stroke and coat underneath does not work. I've also tried it with Bellissimo colour, and it also didn't work. It didn't work only after I stress tested this piece. It was a closer fit between the paint and the glaze, and on taking it out of the kiln it looked like I'd found a solution. However, when I've stress tested this with boiling water, put a bit more stress on the surface of the glaze, I've managed to force a few cracks into the glaze, so that makes it non-utility. You can't have a piece that you can't actually use, so that's a fail. There is a solution, and that's to find a colour product that has no glaze in it. Both the Bellissimo and the stroke and coat have a small amount of glaze mixed in with the colour, so if you were to paint 3 coats of stroke and coat or Bellissimo onto your bisque and fire it, it would come out shiny. If you have a colour product that has no glaze in it, like an underglaze, then when we put this new clear glaze over the top, the clear glaze is not fighting against the glaze in the colour, because there is none. And by doing that, we have found we have stability and we have success, and it works. So that's with the Mako Stroke and Coat underglaze. No, sorry, not Stroke and Coat. This is Mako underglaze. Mako underglaze. Any underglaze product that has no glaze mixed in with it, I would expect would also be stable. We've also done a successful firing with Mako Designer Liner, which is again just basic pigment, strong concentration of pigment with no glaze in, and we've put this different clear glaze over the top, 5-06. This looks grubby again because I've rubbed ink in to see if there's any cracks, and there aren't, and that works. So there is a solution to it, but it's not going to be with the glaze that you have in your studio. You would have to buy a new powdered glaze, and you would only want to do that if you've got a whole load of this, because you're going to have to only use that powdered glaze on these pieces. That powdered glaze would not work on your other bisque that you had. So it's a very specific solution if you wanted to create pieces that were fired and glazed. But if you've got a different possible use for it, there's some, they're well-made pieces. It's just the clay that was used was not the clay that we were expecting to be used, which has meant that we have written this off. This is all not saleable in our normal industry, normal way of finishing with the glazes that you're currently working with.